Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, Happy birthday to you.
Yay!
And now he'll never speak again.
Arnold wishes to tell you happy birthday and to go pump up and get your puny muscles in shape. You puny little man. Arnold wishes you happy birthday. Nobody knows what you're talking about. Go pump yourself up, you puny little man.
I'm Wee Wee, or Oi or
something. We don't know.
Whatever you want to
Still
call
don't
me.
know. Hey, Wee Wee,
Get that
episode
in yet.
5. We're on one
Oh.
full hand now. You can count
Nice.
all our episodes on a full hand, and then
Well done, Murphy, you can count to 5.
I know. Eventually, we'll get to this hand, but right now we're on the left hand. Eventually,
Okay.
what are we gonna do
I
after we get to this
I
one?
don't want to know what you're doing with your other hand.
I'm waving them and counting the fingers. Remember, he doesn't
Anyway.
get my video, so.
Anyway.
But yeah, anyway, episode 5. So 5 straight weeks of getting this show out there. I'm still quite impressed. But alright, so this week, not much news again. Come on, Cryptic, put out some news so we can talk about some news. But that doesn't mean we have a short show at all. No, we've got our trailer contest winner and second place. You guys will be receiving your rewards in the mail. If I have your @names, I believe I do. I haven't checked yet. I should probably get on that. So future me, when you're watching this in editing, remember, get those rewards out there. But yeah, we've got our trailer contest winners, which we will announce when our reviews start up. And then, we were reviewing our mission contest winner. So we'll be covering that in our review this week, which I have to say, very interesting. It was a fun mission. And then after that, we're going to have some quick tips on character development from Wee Wee over there. Or here, I don't know where I put him. He's over here. There. Anyway, and then after that, we've got community feedback, where I'm going to be bringing on Nikki, who was the one who pitched the idea of our community feedback question. She's got a few points she wants to talk about, and there's a couple other community stuff that we want to be talking about as well in that segment. So we're jam-packed this episode for episode 5, and just thinking ahead, episode 6 is going to be pretty cool. We got some stuff. We got stuff working in the background for a couple more guests on episode 6, and if that all works together, episode 6 is going to be awesome. So, but let's stick to awesome episode 5, which is still on one hand, because 6 will be 2. But episode 5, let's go.
This week on Spotlight of the Foundry, Dead Man Tells No Tales by Avarius. A secret mission to the Careless Expanse to save the Klingon homeworld from Federation trickery, where one human discovers that apparently it wasn't a good day to die. Journey to a realm out of time, out of space, and out of your mind.
The outer colonies were the first to fall. 23 in a matter of hours. Our sentry vessels tossed aside. No defense against the storm. And by the time they had surrounded our star system, hundreds of cubes, we had already surrendered to our own terror.
So there you have it. Longing, congratulations for winning our trailer contest. I have to say, I was quite impressed by this one. And our second place one, because me and Wee Wee were both on opposite ends. Wee Wee was going Midas should have won. I was going Longing. And none of us were willing to give way and say, okay, we'll go with this one. We had to bring in, like, other Jupiter Force members to help break the tie. It was a tough call.
It must have been about half a dozen of people we asked to try and get this done.
Yeah, we had Mav and Nikki and then Lee, who does some footage gathering, who's actually going to help improve some of our footage bumps and stuff. But yeah, it took us tons of time to actually pick out our winner, because these two were so awesome. So our second place was In the Shadows of Midas, Part 1. And that's actually a recent one made, so I was quite happy that this was made during the contest window, because our whole goal was to try to get people to make more trailers. And I was quite impressed with this one, because it used tons of demo footage. And you know what, I will probably show that off either at the end of this episode or a future episode from now, because it's awesome. I loved it. We loved it, because, yeah. But, awesome job.
It was the longing, or the yonging, as you put it here.
He's making a big deal because I misspelled the mission in our doc.
You put an I instead of the L, so...
They're like right next to each other on the keyboard. It's like I's diagonally and up, and come on. It's called typo. Heard of them? Oh, obviously, because in that one mission it was British misspellings. My bad. I'm sorry.
You can spell dialogue right. I had a difficult time in reading over notes.
Alright. Anyway, so let's move into our review of The Longing, because that was one of your contest rewards, and we can't skip it. No, actually, it's a good mission, so let's talk about it. Anyway, we've got... Shut up. 410 plays on this mission, an average starting of 4 out of 5 stars. Perfectly. That was quite interesting to see. And it's designed for level 41 and above, because the intro to this mission is in Borg space, which you cannot get to unless you are level 41 or above, or something like that. So, lower class players, you won't be able to pick this up or travel to the system. So, designed for Admiral play. So let's move into story. The Borg are on their way to a Federation colony after finding some interesting readings coming from the world. It's up to you to discover the secrets of this colony and stop the Borg invasion before it is too late. So very fun story here. It was really good. Both of us really enjoyed it, especially, this is a very old mission actually. It came out early within the Foundry. In fact, I think it was on Tribble, right? For the early days of Tribble testing. I remember playing it on Tribble, so... It
was one of the 4 missions picked when the Foundry was still on Tribble.
Oh, yes, that's right. That's where I remember it from.
Holodeck. Yeah. It was like the original version.
So this is old.
Richard Garrett's remastered it a couple of times.
Yeah, the version we're reviewing here was a remastered version, which I had not played. I had played the original one, and I noticed some differences. There weren't anything major, but I did notice a few stuff he added, and I was like, oh, that wasn't there last time I played. Especially the puzzle, which we will get into later. But story-wise, it's still all basically there. I didn't notice much added in for story. But it contains a very interesting plot and a set of characters. Now, the characters aren't as memorable as other missions, but I still thought they were pretty well written. Especially the villain, which we don't want to give any major spoilers on why he's the villain. But I did like that character quite a bit. I remember him after the mission, and I've remembered him since I played it as that guy. I don't know his name. I have a bad time remembering character names, so sorry if I don't remember your characters' names when I review a mission. But this was a character that stuck out, and it's because of what he does during this mission, because it's so unique and kind of weird. I mean, we both argued, like, why would he do this? But we've kind of seen it in Star Trek in the past, but we don't want to give away the spoiler for that, so we're going to move on past that, but play it, because these two categories... Alone, I'd say play it because of the plot and the characters, because it's still pretty good for that alone. Then, yeah, very well written dialogue with no spelling and grammar mistakes. I didn't run across any, which I was quite impressed, and it was really well written compared to other missions out there. And then there was also no canon contradictions and some touchstoning in the mission on several subjects. I noticed especially like the Riemann resistance. There was like a news console where it was flashing recent news going on, which include like the Riemann resistance. I didn't read it, but I remember seeing an option to read through that.
She included the first 3 feature episode series. The
cool.
Yeah.
So that it's kind of cool always to see how, because you never really see it in Star Trek how news gets around.
Not really.
Like you never see media and stuff, but you know news has to get around because come on, we have it like going all around today like crazy.
Cisco. So he was kind of a reporter for the
But that seemed really primitive compared to what we have today with web podcasts and videocasts and live streaming and stuff. I mean, that was basically like, it seemed like 1960s newspaper guy. And actually there is a mission out there, it's like Woody Valley's mission, where you actually go on to the set of a talk show or something. That was a really interesting thing to see. But we're on the longing right now, so let's not talk about another mission. But also another thing that's Touchstone on is like the assimilation of the Elarian homeworld, which you hear a bit about because of Guinan from TNG, and the whole Borg episode where she's like, these guys, they're bad, there's no making peace with them.
They don't mess around.
It was the first time in Star Trek where you really hear like, there's no making peace with these guys. I mean, even with the Klingons and TOS, you could see, why can't we just work together? And then you get the movie where it's like, okay, it's the undiscovered country, let's make peace. No, with the Borg, it's just screw it, where there's no chance of peace. That's why the Borg are kind of cool. So it touchstones onto stuff like that in this mission. Overall, story received an 8.36, 9th ranked in story. Really well. Now, story hasn't changed much, and it was a really good story when the Foundry came out, one of those top ones, which is why it was spotlighted. So still, even today, it is standing up against all the other missions that have come up across time. So very well in story, and it's a highlight of why to check this mission out. Next is technical. And we've got some pretty good maps in this mission. Nothing new, nothing like customized, no new rooms built in the air or anything, but it's used some pretty good. It has some pretty good use of old maps that we've seen in the Foundry, and some good customization thrown into those. Like there's a colony you visit. There was some really good customization to that, which we'll get into in art assets in a second. But also there was some good transition in this mission. No pointless maps, but again, no transitions were avoided. But I don't think you really could have in this mission. And then the authors show some great knowledge of the tool set when it comes to creating puzzles, the colony, and some trigger use with like the puzzle again. And then some good art asset usage to creating a colony. Now, really, he just used some building and some other stuff, and alone that wouldn't make it amazing. But he has so many unique NPCs walking around down there and talking to each other and saying different stuff that I noticed that right off the bat. I was like, this colony is alive. I mean, you can actually kind of walk by and listen in on these people's conversation.
It really feels like an actual colony you would visit one day.
Yeah, I remember playing so many other missions, Foundry missions included, where you can walk around, but the people aren't saying anything. Or there's not a lot of people out. This really felt like an active colony. So, bonus on setting that mood and environment there. Nothing major on the creative side, though the colony was pretty good, but it wasn't like a huge wow moment when you look at it. The mission had some good instructions, but it includes the good instructions in your mission objectives and in like the green font in your dialogue, where will tell you your mission objective through there. But it is missing one key thing: where to start the mission. Now, in the mission objective dialogue.
Well, yeah, it has it in the description and the actual in progress bar when you click on it, and the initial dialogue, but it doesn't actually have it in the when you actually go to select the mission. It's on the right hand side of your UI. It's just an overall description of the plot in that area of space. Yeah, there's no go to this system, which is something quite common we see nowadays. So maybe a little touching up there would be a good idea, just to add this, making sure the author knows where exactly to go.
I know when I had picked up the mission earlier. And I had logged off. But when I came back in, I forgot where the system was. And because every other mission's doing this, I looked up in the right hand to see where it was. And it wasn't there. And that's kind of frustrating because so many other Foundry authors are doing it. And Stowe missions do it. And it's sad that it's not... This telling the person where to go is not easier in the Foundry. And they still haven't made it easier. I wish they would fix that. But the workaround is used because that is how people find your mission. And... It was lucky enough that he was able to include it back in the prompt, like when you go in your mission journal and read the little description. It is included there, and that's how I figured it out. But really, it should be added into your objectives, so people can easily find it. Because a lot of people won't know to look in their journal to see the little description there of where to go. A lot of them are going to drop the mission and go, 1 star, I couldn't find your system if they logged out. And that can be a problem. So it's a very little thing you want to fix, because even though it's a little thing as that, it's also a major thing, because if a person's too lazy to pick up the mission again, they're going to drop it and just go 1 star. And it sucks, but... And then...
That's actually something we touched on last week, actually, in our segment.
So, and then again, there's a major Foundry limitation in this mission as well. And it's only one instance, but it's huge. And I think you can kind of tell that this is a bit of an older mission through this, because you don't see a lot of authors doing this today. But in this mission, you go to your bridge. The problem with the Foundry is you can't have a player go to their bridge. So what he does is when you go to your bridge, it's the classic TNG bridge from the Enterprise D. That is not my bridge for my ship on any of my characters, or nor yours. A lot of people are using, I want to say, more of the modern bridges, even though that is one of them. But the problem with having a player go to their bridge is that everybody is using different bridges. Like, I don't think there's one everybody's going to. I've seen it pretty far spread out across the board where everybody's using a different bridge. And I mean, you've got the C-Store, you've even got bridges people are using that are not in the Foundry. And that can be a problem there. I mean, it wouldn't be a major problem for me if this was like, I was flying the Tholian ship, because I don't expect an author to know that I have the Tholian ship and I'm in the bridge there.
Yeah.
But
all the bugs.
Yeah. But the problem is that it's a fed bridge that's not mine. So when it throws me out of the environment when I've thrown into this, because immediately when it goes, this is my bridge, it takes me out of the mission looking around going, this isn't my bridge. Mine's like the Prometheus bridge. So that's something.
Yeah.
It's a major Foundry limitation, because if you're going to have the player go to their bridge, you really can't have them go to their bridge. There's a small faction of people who are going to be able to go to their bridge because they use that bridge.
Usually people in Foundry missions, authors, tend to avoid that kind of thing. They usually create a battle bridge or just a corridor, like a transporter room or a science lab, and just avoid going to the bridge completely.
Yeah.
Or if the player character itself is going to the bridge, they just usually beam up into space. We basically never see any kind of player going to any actual bridges. And in this mission, that kind of things happen. So it's not something that's advised so much, because people will argue like, this is my bridge, 1 star, exit the mission. So it's something authors really should avoid in this mission. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think another way he could have worked around this was there was another ship at the beginning of this mission that was under attack by Borg. But he has the ship get the heck out of there because they're heavily damaged. I think he could have rewritten it to be that ship had to stay in the system. They couldn't escape. Their warp drive's disabled. They only have low impulse power, so they can't get out of the system. And then eventually, instead of having the Borg invade your ship, they invade that ship and you beam over there. And it can have that bridge because it's not the player's ship. They don't decide.
That'll be a lot better because it's not the player's bridge. Yeah, exactly.
I think that's where it would have been better to go.
Just a couple of suggestions there. Yeah, but what did the technical overscore there, Murph?
5.93, 17th rank in tech. So room for improvement. It's not bad, but there's definitely a lot of room for improvement. And he has remastered it since it originally came out with the Foundry, so he does include some of this new stuff like branching dialogue and other stuff. But I think there's still even more room for improvement in technical. All right, Game Master Wee Wee, let's go ahead.
Well, to start with, space gameplay was kind of weak. There's barely any movement or interaction in space at all. There's just 1 or 2 reach markers throughout the mission, and it's mostly combat as far as space gameplay is concerned. It's like on the very first map, you only have like 1 reach marker to enter orbit, and then there you go. That's basically it. The rest of the time, it's just blow up a few Borg ships.
There's nothing really to score there, so. But I don't think it was intended for space gameplay.
Space combat could have made up for it, but it was weak, however.
Yeah.
There are a number of Borg ships, but they are all separated by large distances. Kind of feels like a simple Borg DSC.
Or a patrol mission.
No stacking either. Yeah, or a patrol mission. There's no stackings, which could have improved that side of the mission quite a bit, actually. But all you do is just go over here, blow something up, and go over there and blow something up. It feels pretty average, something anybody really could do.
Yeah.
So a lot of improvement on there, maybe to include outside of space things, but it's mainly a ground-orientated mission. And speaking of ground, the ground gameplay was quite engaging.
Yeah.
It makes up for the space side of things, like I said. There's plenty of options in alternate dialogue when speaking to an NPC. There's more alternate dialogue when accessing consoles, like the news network we mentioned before, like the feature episode series news. That's a great touch. Yeah. There's an interesting puzzle when attempting to integrate yourself with a Borg drone. I'll let yourself cover that more in the mission.
Oh, yeah.
But when you go through it, it draws elements from the Star Trek Borg PC game and elements of the Best of Both Worlds dialogue when they're trying to remove Picard from being the Q-tist. So a lot of touchstoning on that side of things, which is really good. But it's an interesting puzzle.
But it's tough.
But it was difficult. Yeah, it's difficult.
I don't want to throw in here and he fixed this, but originally when this came out, I do remember a lot of people complaining they could not complete that puzzle, so we had to add in something to skip over it. I had to skip over it. I couldn't figure out what to do. What? Did you have to skip it?
I had a lot of trouble myself. I actually couldn't find the dialogue because there were so many options.
Oh, yeah.
So it's incredible. It's a lot of muddling around and how to proceed with the Borgron. So it's kind of looking... It's one of those things where you simply clicking through every dialogue option you see won't get you through the mission. You have to think about what you're doing during it. So it's not something you just go click, 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 done.
I could see this puzzle being a major frustration point for some people, but for people who really like puzzles and sitting down and really working on it, I could see them really liking this part. But
there is that bridge officer thing you mentioned earlier.
So you can still skip over it. It's not obvious,
you can skip over it,
but it's there.
It gives you the captain feeling, which feels like you're making the decision. You're the boss. You tell them what to do and they'll go do it.
I'm not going to beam down to 5 and scan 5 plants. You go do it. I don't want to lower this Borg force field. You do it. I like that feeling. I'm the boss. I don't have to do any of the work. I'll just give it to all my minions. Come on, that's what a boss does.
Whilst all of that is happening during the puzzle, you have to deal with some Borg drones, which are quite engaging.
That was fun.
Ground combat terms. There are high-level groups, which makes it difficult but interesting. There's plenty of heavy and elite tactical drones, so watch out for those armed cannons of death. So expect to be one-shotted if you haven't got a very good equipment or something. There's no stacking, but like I said, it's not needed because Borg do pretty well on their own with high-quality groups that are present in this mission. So very good thing on that end. We've seen a couple of times where we've got lower quality groups, but there's no stacking either, and it's just a simple shoot and go through again. This is a lot more difficult because it's high-level group. It didn't proceed through the stacking with low-level groups. It went through the other option, which is an interesting idea.
I quite enjoyed the ground combat in this mission. And there was a point, I think it was when I was taking down, there's an elite drone down there. I lost all my buffs, so it was just me and the elite drone left, and I was like, oh crap, I gotta kind of strategize so I don't die here, because I was out of hypos as well, because I was playing on an ult.
Final showdown.
So it was definitely the final showdown, and this isn't the last ground combat part, but it's close to it. This is honestly the boss fight for the ground. And it felt like it at that point. So I quite enjoyed the ground combat.
There is a bit of replayability. It's limited. There's no alternate endings per se, but there are different optional pathways to proceed through when interacting with an NPC, as I mentioned before. It's frustrating partly because the NPC has failing options, which draws you out of the dialogue text altogether. Partly also because the dialogue is also well written, which isn't a bad thing, but it makes it difficult to choose which is the correct option and which is going to throw you out of the dialogue altogether, so you have to proceed through all the different options, like, did I click this, did I click that, what happens if I click this?
I know I didn't have any problems for the NPC that you're talking about here for this situation. I didn't have any problems. I moved through it all without failing. Did you have problems with it, which is why you picked this up, I believe?
Yeah, I had a couple of problems. Like I said, the dialogue's well written. There's nothing wrong with that.
No, not at all.
Just in this instance, it's a bit tough to it's a bit tough to see where you're going. And what I advise with any author actually doing that kind of thing is make a loop. Essentially, you can drag the pointer, instead of setting it to fail on that sort of thing, drag it to one of the earlier dialogue boxes there in the dialogue options, so it can loop back around so nobody's thrown out the dialogue, and it's frustrating every time. Oh, I have to click on them again, I have to click on them again, I have to click on them again, that kind of thing. So
instead of throwing them back to start, throw them back to the part where they made the wrong choice. That's what I do in my missions. I think I've only used the fail option a few times, and that's just when you piss off the person to the point where you just should start over.
There are some great points in gameplay as well, but there are some weak points.
Yeah.
And overall, the gameplay scored a 6.22, which put it in 17th place, actually.
So good score, but again, room for improvement, I think mainly on the space combat, is to make it feel less patrol-y and more just fun space combat like the feature episodes. Instead of, go here, kill a thing, go here, kill a thing, go here, kill a thing. Okay, you killed your 3 out of 3, go kill the boss ship. I think that could be just reworked a little bit so the ground, or not the ground, the space gameplay could be more fun. Alright, Wee. What are we saying here overall for this mission? What do we think?
Well, overall, it's a good mission from the early days of the Foundry that was spotlighted. It still stands up today. Great remastering as well. Yeah. With a fun, interesting story and good ground gameplay, it's well worth your time to check out this mission.
Yes.
I advise looking up for those issues addressed in this mission earlier, but overall, you probably will enjoy this mission, yeah.
6.84 is our score for this, so pretty good. I mean, 7 is about the average we see for most of our really good missions, so it's up there still, even though it is quite an old mission. So really good work here, Rachel Garrett, captain of the Enterprise C with the thing in their head, because we went. So yeah, that's our mission for this week. I hope we do get to review our second place mission. So I'm going to say it here. We will review that coming up when we can. Next week I think we might be reviewing a Cleon mission, if we can. We're trying to find one. But we will try to fit in our second place review in the future, because it is quite an interesting trailer. So I assume if we got quite an interesting trailer for that mission, it's going to be quite fun. So thank you for everybody else who sent in their trailers. We will try to play them in the show eventually, and I'll cover it more in community feedback, because we still want to see your trailers. Because, come on, trailers are fun to watch. I mean, we had a blast just looking through them and checking them out, because it's a cool art and it's fun. And that's why we had this contest. So thanks for everybody who submitted, and let's move into community feedback.
And on to our tip of the week. Last week we did plot. This time doing characters. So let's go over what kind of things characters, what kind of good characters make in good missions, and how they're integrated. Low-scoring missions in the character section usually score low because the characters have nothing to do with enhancing the story. They just get you to one step to another. Having a well-written character makes a mission memorable. Look at Obasek, for example, from the Riemann series. Many people love that series because of that awesome character. We all love Obasek. He's awesome. And he's even in the new season, which is another point. Personality. The way they think, the way the character thinks, and the way they talk are very important to creating memorable characters. Also, when having multiple characters, make them all feel different and unique. Make them argue a bit or something, which is another good point, because their dialogue during those arguments is a key figure to getting to know the character. That's the only way a player is going to get to know the characters of the mission. Creating a well-written dialogue for your characters is very, very important. It's a great idea for enhancing a story like that. Have them as part of a story, not just a step. Like, for example, you have a diplomat talking to some Klingons. They're like kind of they're not really shooting anything. They've got a couple of enemies nearby. It's like the diplomat's trying to convince them. Then they say something wrong. That kind of dialogue option. What did the diplomat say to the Klingons to make them blast the enemies out of nowhere into oblivion or something? That kind of argument and dialogue and the character creation and the development is essential for creating a good mission in that way, so you can integrate your plot a lot more effectively and enhance the story much better.
And welcome to Community Feedback. We hope you enjoyed that review last time. You're not Wee-Wee!
No, I'm not Wee-Wee. Shall I pretend to be?
No. I think I can handle not having Wee-Wee here for a little bit.
Well,
anyway.
You have me, which is even better.
I know, right? So, okay, so I brought on Nikki here, who was the one who originally pitched our idea for our last community feedback segment and Foundry discussion, which was non-Foundry author reviews. So she has a couple points she wants to bring up here, and then we're going to cover a little bit that we received on the forums from other players. But why don't we get started with your points here, Nikki? So what do you have to say?
Well, first off on the bat, one-word reviews. Not very constructive, not very helpful. There's been, I don't know how many times I've seen reviews that say things like awesome, yay, meh. Those aren't really reviews, not very helpful to Foundry authors like Murphy, Wee-Wee, and anyone else out there. I mean, even, I believe your trailer winner was quoting a few one-word reviews, and those aren't always the most helpful and constructive things to have.
No, so using full sentences really helps, even if you just say, I loved the space combat, or this mission was completely awesome. They know you loved everything about it. Just saying, like, awesome alone, I don't know what's awesome about my mission, because usually there's not one Foundry mission out there that we've encountered where everything's been perfect about it. And not everything needs to be perfect about a mission, but it's good to let authors know what's working, what's not, which is another one of your points coming up here.
Yep. That's just give them something to know what's right But moving on to point 2, and this one might be a little bit on, take it with a grain of salt, might be a little controversial, but some authors may be limited to the Foundry, which is a point you touched on last week, in that, you couldn't get NPCs to beam out at a certain point, so you'd have to put that, like, in the dialogue in parentheses or something, whereas some Foundry authors have a tendency to, like, slam into limitations, and one example I found that was the best way to do that is an author wrote a Foundry mission based on the Pares, and they basically reskinned a whole bunch of the Fakiri to look like zombified Bajorans. The problem is because the Fakiri are so gigantic, a lot of these the slave masters or whatever, they'd have these gigantic flaming battle axes that were 3 times the NPC size.
I want to see that.
It's just totally goofy and breaks your immersion. So some people, it's a small sticking point, like beaming out the little things you can forgive because they're just hitting the limitations of the Foundry. But when you have all your NPCs walking around with these giant flaming battle axes that are 3 times their size, and it's so goofy that you can't take it seriously, that's something totally different. It might be funny to certain people's tastes, but that's when it maybe deserves a little bit of criticism for running into those Foundry limitations.
Yeah, if you're making a serious Foundry mission, I think that's something you want to avoid. If you're just making a goofy mission, that's something actually you probably want to go for. But yeah, and it also kind of goes on to we just reviewed The Longing, and the author has you go to your bridge, and we discussed this a whole bunch in the review, but that's a Foundry limitation that he kind of just slams into because you can't set it to be a player's bridge. That one kind of deserves criticism, while some others do not, like not being able to beam out NPCs or stuff like that, because a Foundry author until now has not been able to do that. But once Season 7 comes, we can.
Yeah, I remember playing through The Longing, and I know with the character I played at the time, I didn't have a Galaxy Bridge, which was, I think, what they used, whereas now I don't know what they have if I went back to it, but
yeah, it's the same thing.
Having an Odyssey Bridge, it would be so epic to fight through that, but I know they would be able to bring up the bridge, an actual Odyssey, and have the fight being on both levels or in that transporter chamber. That's just one of those kind of little things, is, small kind of bump into the limitations, or it's slamming head on at high speed.
Yep. Okay, so kind of going back to what we were saying during point 1 is your point 3 here, which is give a positive, a negative, and overall comment on the mission, which I really like, because there is enough room to go a quick positive comment, a quick negative comment, and then what's your overall opinion of the mission.
Yeah, like, if you're going to be writing a review, try and tell an author something they did right. Tell them, give them also that constructive criticism, and then an overall comment. And one of the other things I would say is, get that overall comment to be kind of what you base your star rating on. If there's maybe some really good dialogue, or you really like how they did, for example, the space combat or the ground map, give them that positive, give them that constructive feedback, but give them a star rating based on how much you enjoyed yourself. And that way they know if it's, a couple of positives and a laundry list of negatives, and you give them a low star, now the author knows why you've given them such a low rating. But conversely, if they did all of these things right, tell them what they did right, but also tell them stuff they need to improve on, so that when they go in and do those new, say, another mission, or they decide to revisit, they can raise the bar.
Yep. I definitely like that a lot more than the one-word review, because when I read through my reviews, I skip over the one-words because they don't help me. I don't even care if it's constructive criticism where they're saying this part of the mission sucked, because that's helping me in the future to improve on those aspects in later missions that I create. And again, don't be afraid to give an honest review, which is your next point here, because being honest about ever reviewing anything is helping that person out, even if it's not great feedback.
Exactly, and that's why I kind of really emphasize that in point 4, is not only be honest, but be willing to play that mission more than once. Especially if you're on the fence of what you want to say, or if you're not sure, does this, maybe there's something wrong, but you're not sure, is it a deal breaker, is it just something small? That's something you really need to do. If that's something you need to decide on, you're a little on the fence, go back, play it once more, see how it feels, and that way you can be more honest. If it's, if the dialogue is solid all the way through and it keeps you engaged, even though there's maybe something that's not quite working with the way the mission's laid out, or or just all the interactions, maybe it's not spot on. But if it's that really good story and it's keeping you engaged, it's worth writing a good review. But if you're on the fence and you only play once and you're not sure how you feel and you just kind of stumble through the review, the author's not going to know where you're coming from, and in a way it's a little less honest.
I definitely agree with especially if you're picking apart a mission, you need to play it more than once, especially if there's lots of branching dialogue, optional objectives, because for our Klingon one we played a couple weeks ago, Ceridium's mission, I did not have any space combat experience when I played through that the first time, but because you can go to different zones and enter different systems, I skipped a couple of them the first playthrough because I got to the system I was supposed to find. But on my second playthrough, I found space combat, which I had not scored for the first time. So finding that, I realized, oh, I skipped this whole aspect of the mission, and this changes it. And it did drastically impact our score in the end. So if I would not have played that, he probably would have received maybe a lower gameplay score, especially in space combat.
Yeah, definitely. If you miss a bit of dialogue or an optional, or even sometimes if with that branching dialogue, perhaps you miss a really good joke that's in there that you wouldn't get if you did everything right. So sometimes it's worth going back through and seeing what happens if you do make a mistake.
And then point number 5 you have here is if you're still on the fence, then it's sometimes better not to score or review a mission. And I completely agree.
Yep, definitely. There's no reason for hitting submit with a blank sheet, and 3 stars, especially if it's a really high rated mission or a really low rated mission, you'll start skewing ratings. There's no comments there, and really there's no point in trying to boost the rating of a grind mission or damaging somebody's rating if especially if you're not sure what to write. You can always just hit the cancel button. So if you're really on the fence, you can't decide what you want to say, hitting cancel is probably the more honest and beneficial thing to do for a Foundry author than it would be trying to write something that's maybe convoluted, you're not sure where you're going with it, giving them a star rating, and really if you're just totally unsure, it translates across to the author, and ultimately if it seems like you're being overly critical or you don't know where you're going, give them a really lousy star rating, they're just going to ignore you, or conversely, blowing smoke up a Foundry author's rear for a really bad mission, it's just not going to help. So
think before you
just
submit.
Click cancel.
Yeah, definitely think before you submit, because I find myself, if I have not been able to complete a Foundry mission because of possibly a bug that I think might be Cryptic's fault, I will hit cancel and PM that author, because I don't like not being able to complete a mission and reviewing it. So that's the number one advice I would give for when you have to hit the cancel button. Now, if you finish a mission and you don't know what you want to rate it, then hit the cancel button, because again, it's there. Don't forget there's a cancel button there, because I even find myself, even if I enjoy it, for a long period of time, I just hit cancel because I got fed up with the 5-star system. I didn't even use it. I've gotten back into it now because it's the only way to give a Foundry author feedback other than just doing the show and reviewing every mission. But so those are your 5 points there. We got a little bit of forum feedback, and I just want to briefly touch on it. But a couple of the major ones we saw there was realize that the Foundry is a limited tool set, and that is a big one, and we covered it before, that it's not as big as Cryptic's tool set, and we don't have as many abilities in the Foundry as a Cryptic dev tool set. Also, I saw quite a few comments on constructive criticism. A lot of Foundry authors agree with that. I think even players agree with that overall. They don't want to see just people trashing out other people's missions, because it's not a morale booster at all. And it just brings these people who are dedicating their time, not getting paid, by the way, Cryptic, hello, in making these missions when they're seeing bad reviews. It just makes them not want to do it anymore, and that's a huge detriment to the game overall. It's a huge downer.
This is a pretty big downer, and especially when you think about these people that they're trying to putting together a story, they're adding content, they're hoping that what they've done is really good, and if you're not going to say, if you can't say anything to really help them, or you can at least tell them that what they're doing is good and that you liked it, they're just going to be kind of go whatever. And even if it's a really good mission, if they're really discouraged by it, they might unpublish it and the mission's gone.
Especially early on in the review process.
Exactly.
And then we got one interesting bit of feedback from a player where they thought people who are not Foundry authors shouldn't review at all. Now, they did come out and say, I know that's not going to happen, but this is just me getting on my soapbox saying that. And part of me agrees in a way, a very minor part, though, because another huge part, which is why I disagree with the statement overall, is that you need those people to review missions, or else you're going to have this tiny bit of the community that's reviewing missions, because there is a small community of Foundry authors and a much bigger one of Foundry players, because a lot of people who play Foundry missions are not authors, and that's why they need the ability to review the missions, even if they don't know what exactly the toolset can do, and it can sometimes leave unfair feedback. It's kind of necessary, and you can't just take it out.
Yeah, they definitely need to leave the review process in. I mean, especially when you think about, so many people could offer some constructive feedback, and if you just totally cut yourself off from any sort of review, you make it harder for you to advance as an author, just by limiting to authors, because then you're dependent on authors playing. So, I mean, even though, like, I know as a professional artist myself, even though my biggest feedback I want to have from peers and clients, I'd also want to hear a little bit from amateurs, because if in a lot of ways these amateurs, average Joe off the street, they're the ones being marketed to by all of the projects that I'm working on. So if they're not responding to it, obviously the ad campaign or whatever that I might be working on, or any of that stuff, if it's not being received well by the population it's being marketed towards, those are the amateurs who are ultimately intaking my work. So you want to hear some of that feedback from people who may not know, in my case, everything about photography, but they're going to tell me if they like the image or not. Much the same as you need to have those, I guess, the layman's opinion on your Foundry mission, because if it's something that they enjoy playing, they'll tell you, especially, and as long as they elaborate on what's good, what's bad, then you can still grow, even though they can't say, go into the Foundry and do this and adjust this tool and play with that, and it's fine. They can just say, I really like the dialogue, but I didn't like how this room was set up, or I didn't like the way the branching dialogue works. There was too many choices, or some of the stuff didn't make sense. That sort of little things that they can give you that will definitely help you grow.
Yep. So, Nikki, you've heard of a little show called Star Trek The Next Generation, I believe, right?
Of course. I kind of grew up with that.
Oh, okay. So I was just making sure, because some people might not have.
Yeah, I know. Well, someone like you growing up with Voyager.
No, it was Enterprise. I don't even think Voyager was on the... Oh, no, the last 2 years were on, but I was too young. But yeah, I watched Enterprise growing up. Anyway, we're talking about TNG right now, so let's go back to that. Right now, there's a Kickstarter project going on to restore the Enterprise bridge from the Next Generation. So we have a link in the show notes to go check that out if you want to donate and help the cause to bring the Enterprise bridge back to its fullest for, I guess, machinima projects, and just to show it off to other people, museum, all that type of stuff. And for different amounts you donate, there's also different prizes you can get, which some of them are really cool. If I had the money, I'd totally be donating, but I'm kind of broke, so Vegas kind of cleaned me out at the Star Trek convention.
And who wouldn't want to sit in Picard's chair?
I know, right?
And seriously, I mean, you could sit in Wesley's chair, I suppose, but
he didn't have a chair. He borrowed that chair. He sat like by the three chairs where Deanna, Riker, and Picard sat. He just kind of sat on the ledge there for a while, and they're like, "You can have a chair."
They took the con chair away and gave Wesley a milk crate with a pillow.
Basically, and then also then another bit of news, kind of news. it would have been in our news segment if we didn't already cover this, but we got a nice wrap-up from another Foundry author out there on StarbaseUGC.com, where basically they just summed up all the stuff that's hit Tribble recently for testing Foundry related. So it's covering like the NPC patrols that have been added in, the ability to now hide your NPCs instead of just having them appear. So now you can beam them up, authors. So get working on that.
Yep.
And then the Mugatos, which everybody knows that's the best thing that they've done to the Foundry since it was launched.
They added you to the Foundry?
Yeah, isn't that the best thing ever? That's going to get so many other new Foundry authors in there because people just want Mugato missions out there.
Yep, I can see it now. Hundreds of missions all hunting Murphy.
I bet... Hey. Something's not right there. But anyway, and then also we did wrap up our trailer contest. We still want to see your trailers, so continue to email those to us at foundryfiles@gmail.com, because if we don't have an outro joke or we need something for the intro just to play us into this show, we don't mind using Foundry trailers because we still love seeing those because it's a great art that we want to see continue. So keep sending us in Foundry trailers. We will try to fit them into the show when we can.
Absolutely, keep sending those Foundry trailers.
And missions.
You should have seen how much angst it took for Murphy and Wee to decide who won the trailer.
Yeah, we brought Nikki in, we brought Matt from Stoked Radio in, and then we brought Lee, who does some of the footage for both Foundry Files and Stoked Radio and a whole bunch of other projects. And we all sat down and we just all sat down, watched the trailers, debated, and then finally came out with our winner. So I'm kind of glad it's finally over now, because that was so tough to pick. I was like, oh man, because it kind of stinks when you have two hosts and they both are on opposite ends trying to pick a winner, but we got it done.
Phasers at 10 paces to find a winner.
Yep. So thanks everybody for tuning to episode 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of Foundry Files. We will catch you next week for episode 6. Later.
Hang on, I need to get a drink first.
Okay, hurry up.
Stare at me on bookshelf.
Bring me one. Bam. So that was an awesome trailer. Gangsta Murphy. Yo, congrats! I found a hat. God, how long does it take Wee Wee to get a beverage? Wee Wee's getting a beverage. Wee Wee's getting a beverage. Wee Wee's getting a beverage. Never more. Who's ready to grind dilithium? You gotta get it for your reputation system. You gotta get it for your embassy and your starbase and your gear. Who's ready to grind dilithium? Hello. Oh look, Wee Wee's back. Maybe. Look, I can swear. I can swear while he doesn't. Oh, he has his headset on. Hi, Wee Wee.
What are you doing? I heard voices.
Nothing.
Well, Murphy, thanks very much for having me on Foundry Files.